There was a woman who had everything, and then one day, the world took it all, not slowly, not gently, all at once, like a storm that doesn't ask for permission. And she lay there broken on the cold floor of her own life, looking up at a sky that no longer made sense, asking the only question she had left. Why? Why me? Why this? Why now? And the silence that followed was so loud, it shook her from the inside. But listen, and listen closely, because what happened next is not a tragedy. What happened next is the most extraordinary love story ever written. The story of a woman who has emptied so completely that God finally had enough room to fill her with something divine. She did not lose everything because she was unlucky. She did not fall apart because she was weak. She was broken open, deliberately, purposefully, the way a seed must break before it becomes a tree. You cannot grow into your destiny while you are still gripping your past. And sometimes, when we hold too tightly to what we think our life should look like, life has no choice but to shatter the picture entirely. Because what God has planned for us is too magnificent to fit inside the small frame we built for ourselves. She had plans. Oh, she had such beautiful plans. A life drawn in neat lines, everything in its place, everything making sense. And then one moment, one single moment, and the drawing was crumpled, thrown to the ground, unrecognizable. She looked at the ruins and she wept for the life she had imagined. She wept for the woman she thought she was. She wept for every dream that now seemed impossible. And I want you to know that weeping was not weakness, that weeping was her soul doing the most honest thing it had ever done. She was letting go, even when she didn't know she was letting go. She was letting go. Because here is what nobody tells you about losing everything. When you have nothing left, you finally stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop wearing the mask of a woman who has it all together. Because the mask is gone and the performance is over. And what remains is just you, raw, real, trembling, and achingly, beautifully human. And it is in that rawness, in that stripped down, hollow, terrifying nakedness of loss, that God meets you, not in the church, not in the ceremony, in the ruin. He meets you in the ruin. She had to lose her direction to find her purpose. She had to lose her voice to discover what she truly had to say. She had to lose the life she planned to find the life she was meant to live. And I know that when you are in the middle of that loss, when you are drowning in grief and confusion and the unbearable weight of what used to be, you cannot see this. You cannot feel it. All you feel is the absence. All you see is the empty space where your life used to stand. But that empty space, that terrifying, hollow, silent, empty space, that is not an ending. That is God clearing the ground to build something far greater than anything you could have designed yourself. She picked up the pieces, not all at once. One day, one breath, one small, brave decision at a time. She picked up one piece of herself and held it to the light and said, "This I still have." This they could not take. And then another piece, and another. And slowly, not quickly, never quickly, healing is never quick, slowly, she began to see that what was left of her after everything was stripped away was actually the most precious thing she had ever possessed. Her spirit, her story, her scars that told the world, I survived. And not only did I survive, she became the woman who could look at someone else in the ruins of their life and say, I know this place, I have been here, and I promise you, there is a way through. There is a life on the other side of this that you cannot yet imagine. And that is the most powerful thing a human being can offer another. Not advice, not solutions, not pity, but the living, breathing proof that survival is possible. She became that proof. She became the testimony. The plan God had for her was not visible from where she stood in the beginning. It never is. You cannot see the whole painting when your face is pressed against the canvas. You cannot understand the design when you are standing in the wreckage of the frame. But step back, even just a little, even through tears, even through doubt, step back, and slowly, you begin to see the outline of something extraordinary. You begin to see that every loss was a lesson. Every wound was a window. Every ending was an invitation to begin again, deeper, wiser, more whole than you ever were before. She lost everything, and in losing everything, she found herself. And in finding herself, she found her purpose. And in her purpose, she found a peace so profound, so complete, so unexpectedly beautiful, that she would not trade one single scar, not one, to go back to who she was before. Because who she is now is who she was always meant to be. And so I leave you with this. Whatever you have lost, whatever has been taken from you, whatever lies broken at your feet right now, do not despair. You are not at the end. You are at the beginning. And the most beautiful chapters of your life are always the ones you never saw coming. There are moments in life that arrive without warning. No knock on the door, no gentle whisper that says, prepare yourself, something is coming. Just a sudden, violent shift, and everything you knew, everything you built, everything you loved and planned and prayed for, gone. And in that moment, the very first thing that a human heart does is search for a reason. We reach desperately for an explanation because we have been taught to believe that suffering must mean something went wrong. That pain is a punishment. That loss is a consequence. That if you are lying on the floor of your own life, surrounded by the rubble of everything you once had, it must be because you did something to deserve it. And I want to look you in the eye today and tell you that is the greatest lie you will ever be told. Loss is not punishment. Loss is preparation. And the sooner you understand the difference, the sooner you will stop mourning what was taken and start paying attention to what is being built. Think about this. When a sculptor begins to work, the first thing they do is not add. The first thing they do is remove. They take the chisel and they chip away at everything that does not belong, everything that is excess, everything that is hiding the masterpiece underneath. To the untrained eye, it looks like destruction. It looks like damage, pieces falling to the floor, the original shape disappearing, the material looking less, not more, than it did before. But the sculptor is not destroying. The sculptor is revealing. And you who have lost so much, you who feel chipped away and diminished and reduced, you are not being destroyed. You are being revealed. God is the sculptor, and your loss is the chisel. And what is being uncovered underneath all of that removal is the most extraordinary version of yourself that has ever existed. We spend so much of our lives building walls. We build them carefully, brick by brick. From the time we are young, walls of identity. I am this kind of woman. I live this kind of life. I am defined by this career, this relationship, this role, this title. Walls of comfort. I am safe inside this routine, inside this certainty, inside this version of M. She's story that I have rehearsed so many times. I have started to believe it is the only story possible. Walls of expectation. Life will go this way. Love will feel this way. Success will look this way. And we live inside those walls and we call it a life. But sometimes, and this is the mercy we cannot recognize in the moment, sometimes God looks at the walls we have built and He knows, with a love deeper than we can comprehend, that we have built ourselves into a prison, that the life we are protecting is actually the life that is limiting us, that the walls we call safety are the very walls keeping us from the sunlight. And so with infinite compassion and devastating precision, He removes them, not to hurt us, to free us. Nobody chooses this kind of freedom. Nobody wakes up and says, "Kick it all, I am ready to start again from nothing." We do not volunteer for the fire, but the fire comes anyway, because some things can only be forged in fire. Some strength cannot be built in comfort. Some clarity cannot be found in certainty. Some versions of yourself can only emerge when every other version has been burned away, and what stands in the ash is the truest, most unbreakable, most luminous form of who you actually are. There is a particular kind of woman who has survived great loss. You can recognize her not by her sadness, though she has known sadness and depths that would frighten most people, but by her stillness. There is a stillness in her that did not exist before, a groundedness that cannot be shaken because she has already been shaken to her foundation, and she knows now, with a certainty that lives in her bones, that she did not collapse. She bent, she cracked, she wept on the floor at 3 a.m. with nothing left to offer the world and nothing left to prove. And she did not collapse. And that knowledge that I have been to the very edge of myself, and I did not fall, that is not something that can be taught in a classroom or read in a book or handed to you by someone who loves you. That knowledge can only be earned. It can only be lived. And the price of it is loss. So when life takes something from you, and it will, it does, it must, I want you to resist the first story your mind tells you. The story that says you are being punished. The story that says you did something wrong. The story that says the universe is cruel and random and indifferent to your pain. That story is not true. It has never been true. The universe is not indifferent to you. God is not punishing you. God is not punishing you. What is happening, even when it feels like pure devastation, even when the grief is so heavy you cannot stand upright under its weight, what is happening is that you are being prepared. You are being emptied so that you can be filled with something truer. You are being redirected so that you can arrive somewhere greater. You are being broken open so that the light that has always been inside you finally has a way out. Every woman who has ever become extraordinary became that way through loss, not despite it. Through it, the loss was not the interruption of her story. The loss was the turning point. The moment everything changed. The moment she stopped living the life she had planned and began living the life she was made for. And looking back, always looking back, because you can never see it from the middle. Looking back, she would tell you that the most painful chapter of her life was also the most purposeful. That the thing she begged God to take back was the very thing that set her free. That the prayer that went unanswered was the greatest answered prayer of her life. Because God said no to what she wanted so he could say yes to what she needed. Loss is not the end of your story. Loss is where your real story finally begins. There is a version of you that the world has never seen, not because she does not exist, but because you have never allowed her to exist. You have kept her buried underneath layers of performance, underneath the carefully constructed image of a woman who has everything under control, who knows exactly where she is going, who never lets them see her struggle, who smiles at the right moments and says the right things and wears the right face for every room she walks into. You have been so busy maintaining the appearance of wholeness that you never stop to ask, but who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when the applause stops and the room empties and the mask finally comes off? And the terrifying truth is that most of us spend our entire lives never answering that question because we are too afraid of what we might find. Because we have worn the mask for so long that we have forgotten there is a face underneath it. And then loss comes, and it does not politely ask you to remove the mask. It rips it off violently, completely. Without apology, completely. And you stand there, exposed, trembling, raw, and for the first time in perhaps years, perhaps decades, perhaps your entire life, you are just yourself. No title, no role, no relationship to define you. No achievement to hide behind. No carefully curated version of your story to present to the world. Just you, stripped of everything that was never really you to begin with. And it is terrifying. It is the most terrifying feeling a human being can experience, to stand in the emptiness of their own life with nothing left to prove and no one left to perform for. But inside that terror, if you are brave enough to stay still, if you are courageous enough to sit in the silence instead of running from it, something extraordinary begins to happen. You begin to hear yourself. For the first time, you begin to hear yourself. We live in a world that is allergic to emptiness. The moment silence arrives, we fill it. The moment stillness comes, we reach for distraction. We scroll, we talk, we plan, we consume. We stay busy with a desperation that has nothing to do with productivity and everything to do with fear. Because deep down, we know, we sense that if we ever stopped, if we ever truly stopped and sat in the quiet with ourselves, we might have to face something we have been running from for a very long time. We might have to face who we actually are beneath the busyness, beneath the noise, beneath the story we have been telling the world and telling ourselves about who we are and why we are worthy and what we are worth. That confrontation is the thing we fear most. And yet, it is the only confrontation that will ever truly set us free. When everything is taken from you, the running stops. Not because you choose to stop, because there is nowhere left to run to. The busyness ends, not because you planned the retreat, because the life that kept you busy no longer exists. And in that forced stillness, in that involuntary silence, the masks do not just come off, they dissolve. Because there is no audience left to perform for. There is no one standing in that empty, broken space who needs to be impressed. There is only you, and in the presence of only you, the most honest thing in the world finally has room to breathe. Your truth. Your truth is not the version of yourself you present on your strongest days. Your truth is the version of yourself that exists at 3 in the morning when you have cried until you have nothing left, and the grief has settled into something quiet and still. That woman, that exhausted, honest, unadorned woman sitting in the dark with nothing left to give, she is the realest you have ever been. She is not broken. She is not finished. She is not less than the polished. She is not less than the polished, composed version the world usually sees. She is more. She is infinitely more, because she is real. And real is the rarest, most precious, most powerful thing a human being can be. There is something that happens inside a person when they stop pretending. It is almost physical, the way it moves through you, a kind of release, a loosening, as though the body itself has been holding its breath for years, and finally it exhales. When you stop performing wholeness and allow yourself to be seen in your fractures, something in you relaxes at a level deeper than rest, deeper than sleep, deeper than any comfort the world has ever offered you, because you are no longer spending your energy on the exhausting, endless, soul-draining work of maintaining an illusion. All of that energy, all of that tremendous, beautiful energy that was going into the performance is suddenly yours again. And you can feel it. You can feel yourself returning to yourself. And it is the strangest homecoming because you are arriving somewhere you have never been before, and yet it feels more familiar than anything you have ever known. Because it is you, finally, undeniably, completely you. God does not meet the performance. He never has. He does not show up for the curated version, the highlight reel, the woman who has it all together. He meets the woman who has nothing left. He meets her in the emptiness, in the rawness, in the place where every pretense has finally fallen away, because that is the only place where a true encounter is possible, where there is no more pretending, no more positioning, no more carefully managed presentation of self. Just a human soul, open and honest and aching, and a love so vast and so patient that it has been waiting all this time for you to stop performing long enough to receive it. This is why emptiness is not the enemy. This is why the hollow, gutted feeling that follows great loss is not a symptom of something gone wrong, but a signal of something finally going right. The container had to be emptied before it could be filled with something true. The ground had to be cleared before something real could take root. You had to lose the life you were performing before you could begin living the life you were created for. And the woman who emerges from that emptiness, quiet, clear-eyed, unafraid of her own depth, she is not who you used to be. She is who you were always meant to become. Nobody tells you how slow it is. Nobody prepares you for the particular kind of patience that survival demands. We live in a world that romanticizes recovery. We see the before and the after, the woman broken, and then the woman radiant, standing in her power, glowing with the wisdom of everything she survived. And we absorb that image, and we carry it with us into our own darkness, expecting that transformation to happen the way it happens in the stories, dramatically, completely, in a single breathtaking moment of clarity. And then we find ourselves 3 months into our grief, still crying in the shower, still reaching for a life that no longer exists, still some days unable to get out of bed before noon. And we think, something is wrong with me. Why am I not healed yet? Why am I not glowing yet? Why does the after not look the way it was supposed to look? And to that woman, to every woman who has ever asked herself that question in the quiet of a room nobody else can see, I want to say this with every ounce of gentleness I possess. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not behind. You are not failing at your own recovery. You are simply in the middle of it. And the middle is not a place of failure. The middle is the place where the real work happens. Healing is not an event. It is a practice. It is the most unglamorous, unrewarded, unrewarded practice you will ever commit yourself to. It does not happen in a single conversation or a single prayer or a single morning when you wake up and decide today is the day everything changes. It happens in accumulation, in the quiet, invisible, daily choice to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. One breath, one step, one small brave decision to get up and face the day, even when the day feels like it has nothing to offer you. That is what healing looks like from the inside, not radiant, not dramatic, not Instagram-worthy. Messy, slow, uncertain, and absolutely, completely worth it. Think about what it actually takes to survive something that should have finished you. Think about the sheer audacity of a woman who has been cracked open by life and still chooses to get up in the morning. We do not give that enough credit. We do not pause long enough to recognize the extraordinary courage embedded in the ordinary act of continuing. When everything in you wants to surrender, when the grief is heavier than anything you have ever carried, when the future looks so uncertain it barely qualifies as a future at all, and you still get up, you still breathe, you still put one foot in front of the other even when you cannot see where the feet are going. That is not weakness. That is the most ferocious kind of strength that exists. It is quiet strength, invisible strength, the kind of strength that does not announce itself, does not perform itself, does not wait for applause. It simply endures. And endurance, real endurance, the kind lived in private when no one is watching. That is the foundation of every extraordinary life ever built. And here is what nobody tells you about collecting your pieces from the floor. You do not have to collect them all at once. You do not have to wake up one morning and reassemble yourself completely before you are allowed to move forward. You are permitted to move forward in fragments. You are permitted to be simultaneously broken and rebuilding. You can be grieving and growing at the same time. You can be uncertain and still moving. You can be scarred and still beautiful. In fact, and I need you to hear this, the scars are not the evidence of your damage. The scars are the evidence of your survival. Every mark on you tells a story of something you endured and did not let finish you. Every scar is a sentence in the most powerful story ever written. The story of a woman who refused to be defined by what happened to her. There is a moment that comes not early, never early, never early. Always after the long, dark stretch that feels like it will never end, there is a moment that comes when you pick up one piece of yourself from the floor and you hold it to the light and you realize this piece is still intact. This part of me they could not take. Maybe it is your humor. Maybe it is your faith. Maybe it is the way you love people fiercely and completely, even after love has hurt you. Maybe it is your creativity, your curiosity, the stubborn, persistent flame of your spirit that somehow, impossibly, is still burning. You hold that piece to the light and you say, I still have this. And that one recognition, that one small, quiet acknowledgement that something of you remains, that is the beginning, not of recovery, of return, the beginning of your return to yourself. And then you find another piece, and another. Not because the pain is gone, it is not gone, it may never be entirely gone. And that is something we must make peace with. But because slowly, gradually, with a particular grace that only time and intention can create, you begin to understand that you are more than your pain, that you exist beyond it, that the loss, as enormous as it is, as defining as it has felt, is not the whole of you. It is a chapter, a devastating, transformative, necessary chapter. But it is not the whole book, and you are the whole book. Now, here is the part that changes everything. Here's the part where survival becomes not just personal, but purposeful. Because the scars you have collected, every one of them, are not just your story. They are someone else's lifeline. There is a woman somewhere right now lying on the floor of her own life, exactly where you once lay, staring at a ceiling that offers no answers, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she thought her life would be. And she does not need someone who has never fallen to tell her how to stand up. She needs someone who has been on that floor, who knows the exact texture of that particular darkness, who can look her in the eye from a place of lived experience and say, I know this place. I have been here. I know how cold this floor is. I know how heavy this silence is. I know how impossible standing feels from here. And I promise you, not as a theory, not as a philosophy, not as something I read in a book, I promise you, from the marrow of my own survival, that there is a way through. That is the superpower. That is the gift hidden inside every scar, every loss, every piece picked up from the floor. The ability to be someone else's proof. The ability to walk into the darkness of another person's suffering and carry a light that was lit by your own pain. You become the living, breathing, standing testimony that survival is not just possible, it is transformative, that the woman on the other side of the suffering is not a diminished version of the woman who entered it. She is expanded, deepened, made more tender and more fierce simultaneously, more compassionate because she has known despair, more courageous because she has known fear, more present because she has known loss, more grateful, bed, because she has known emptiness. This is why your healing matters beyond you. This is why every slow, unglamorous, unseen step of your recovery is not just personal progress. It is a contribution to the world. Every time you choose to keep going, you are writing a chapter that someone else will one day need to read. Every time you pick up a piece of yourself and hold it to the light, you are lighting a lamp that will guide someone else through their own darkness. Your survival is not just yours. It belongs to every woman who will come after you and need to know that a woman like her survived something like this and became something extraordinary because of it. There is something unbearable about being in the middle of pain and being told that it has a purpose. There is something that rises up inside you, fierce and raw, and entirely justified, that wants to reject that idea completely. Because when you are in it, when you are truly inside the grief, inside the loss, inside the darkness that has swallowed every familiar landmark of your life, purpose feels like a word that belongs to someone else's story, not yours. Not this. Not here, in this hollow, aching, incomprehensible place where nothing makes sense and the future has gone completely silent. And I will not stand here and tell you that the pain is easy to accept. I will not offer you a tidy, comfortable reassurance that everything happens for a reason, as though those words strung together in that familiar order could possibly be enough to hold the weight of what you have lost. They are not enough. Nothing said in a single sentence is enough for grief that size. But what I will tell you, what I need you to sit with, not today perhaps, but eventually when the sharpest edges of the pain have softened just enough to allow a new thought in is this, the plan that God has for your life is so vast, so intricate, oh, breathtakingly specific to who you are and what you are capable of becoming, that it could not have been revealed to you from where you were standing before everything fell apart. You had to be moved. You had to be relocated, painfully, completely, without your consent, to a different position entirely, before the view became possible. Think about this honestly. Think about the life you were living before the loss arrived. Think about the direction you were moving, the choices you were making, the version of yourself you were becoming. And ask yourself, with complete honesty, the kind of honesty that is only possible now, from this distance, were you truly moving toward the life you were made for? Or were you moving toward the life that was familiar, the life that was expected, the life that required the least amount of courage to choose? Most of us, if we are honest, are not living our destiny. We are living our default. We are living the life that was handed to us by circumstance, by conditioning, by the opinions of people around us who love us but cannot see what we were created for. We are living small, not because we are small, but because smallness was never challenged. And sometimes not always gently, not always kindly, but always purposefully. God disrupts the default to default. He interrupts the ordinary because he can see, from a perspective we do not have access to, that ordinary was never your destination. You cannot see the whole painting when your face is pressed against the canvas. This is perhaps the most important thing I have ever understood about pain and about time, and about the particular mercy of not knowing everything in the moment you are living it. When you are inside the suffering, your vision is limited to what is directly in front of you. The loss, the grief, the absence, the unanswered question of what comes next. You cannot see the composers. Ishin, you cannot see how this moment connects to the moment 3 years from now. How this loss is clearing the ground for something that requires exactly this much space. How this redirection is positioning you for an arrival that will make everything make sense in a way it never could have from your previous location. The canvas is too close, and God is working on a scale that your current position cannot accommodate. He is not working on a postage stamp. He is working on a mural, and murals require distance to comprehend. There is a particular kind of prayer that most of us have prayed at some point in our lives. The prayer that went unanswered. Or more precisely, the prayer that was answered with silence, or with no, or with something so different from what we asked for that it barely registered as an answer at all. And we carried that unanswered prayer like a wound, like evidence of being overlooked, like evidence of being overlooked, like proof that perhaps we were not worth the intervention we asked for. And I want to reframe that completely, because the unanswered prayer is not abandonment. The unanswered prayer is protection. The no that broke your heart was a boundary placed between you and something that would have diminished you. The silence that felt like indifference was actually the sound of something greater being assembled on your behalf in a place you could not yet see, at a pace you could not yet appreciate. The prayer that went unanswered was the greatest answered prayer of your life, because God said no to what you wanted, so He could say yes to what you needed. And what you needed was always, always more magnificent than what you wanted. We are terrible as human beings at knowing what we need. We are extraordinary at knowing what we want. We want comfort, certainty, continuity, the familiar shape of the life we have built and grown attached to. But need is different. Need operates at a deeper level, a truer level, the level at which your soul knows what it came here to do and requires certain conditions to do it. And those conditions are rarely comfortable, rarely familiar, rarely what we would have chosen if the choosing had been left entirely to us. The conditions required for your greatest becoming are almost always the conditions you would have avoided if you could. The fire you would have walked around if there had been another path. The loss you would have bargained your way out of if bargaining had been an option. But there was no other path, and bargaining was not an option. Because what was waiting for you on the other side of the fire was worth every degree of the burning. Every wound was a window. Let that settle. Not a wall, not a dead end, not evidence of a story gone wrong. A window, an opening, a place where the structure of the life you were living cracked just enough to let something in that could never have entered through the solid, defended, carefully maintained walls you had built around yourself. The light that now moves through you entered through the cracks. The wisdom that now lives in you was born in the breaking. The compassion that now defines you was grown in the soil of your own suffering. None of it was wasted. Not one tear, not one sleepless night, not one moment of confusion and grief and desperate, unanswered prayer. Every single moment was being woven with extraordinary precision and love into something that would one day take your breath away with its beauty. And so when you look back, and you will look back, because that is what survivors do, they turn and look at the distance they have traveled, and they are astonished. When you look back at the road you walked to arrive at who you are now, you will not see a story of tragedy interrupted by recovery. You will see a story of design, proseful, intentional, breathtakingly specific design. You will see how every loss pointed somewhere, how every ending created an opening, how every no was a redirection toward a yes so much greater than anything you had dared to ask for. You will see the hand of something loving and intelligent and deeply, personally invested in your becoming, present in every chapter, especially the dark ones, especially the ones you would have skipped if you could, especially the ones that cost you the most. The most beautiful chapters of your life are always the ones you never saw coming. Not because life is random, but because God's imagination is so much larger than yours. Because what He has planned for you exists so far beyond the boundaries of what you would have planned for yourself that it could never have fit inside the small, familiar, comfortable container of the life you were living before everything changed. He had to expand you to receive it. He had to empty you to fill you with it. He had to empty you to fill you with it. He had to move you completely, painfully, without asking permission, to the exact position from which the view of your own destiny finally becomes visible. There comes a moment not announced, not scheduled, not arriving on any timeline you planned, when you look at your life and you no longer recognize the woman you used to be, not because she was bad, not because she was wrong, but because you have grown so far beyond her, expanded so completely past the boundaries of who she was and what she believed was possible, that she feels like someone you once read about in a story rather than someone you actually were. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens inside you. Not fireworks, not drama, something quieter than that, something deeper, a stillness that settles in the center of your chest like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, a recognition so profound and so complete that it bypasses the mind entirely and lands directly in the soul. The recognition that everything, every loss, every wound, every unanswered prayer, every morning, you could not get out of bed. Every night you cried until there was nothing left. Every moment you believed you were finished. Everything was working for you, not against you, for you. Always, only, entirely for you. This is the conclusion that life eventually writes for every woman brave enough to survive her own unraveling. Not a conclusion of arrival, because growth never truly arrives, it only deepens, but a conclusion of understanding. The understanding that you were never as lost as you felt, that the darkness you walked through was not punishment, but passage, that the God who allowed the breaking was the same God who was present in every single moment of the breaking, holding what was most essential about you intact, protecting the seed of who you were becoming, even while everything else was falling away. You were held through all of it, even when you could not feel it, even when the evidence seemed to suggest the opposite, even in the deepest, most silent, most terrifying moments of your loss, you were held. And now look at you. Look at what you have become on the other side of everything that tried to diminish you. You are not the woman who entered the story. You are not who you were before the loss arrived and rearranged everything. You are someone who has been tested at the level of your foundation and did not collapse. Someone who has sat in the emptiness and discovered that emptiness is not the absence of meaning, but the beginning of it. Someone who has picked up the pieces of herself from the floor, one by one, in the slow and unglamorous and entirely private work of healing, and reassembled herself into something more honest, more powerful, more compassionate, more real than the polished, performing, carefully managed version that existed before. You have been through the fire, and fire does not destroy what is meant to endure. Fire reveals it, purifies it, releases everything that was never truly yours, and leaves behind only what is essential, only what is real, only what is permanently, unshakably you. The scars you carry are not your shame. They are your scripture. They are the written record of a woman who encountered the worst that life could offer and chose, in the face of it, to keep going, to keep believing, to keep reaching, even with broken hands, toward a future she could not yet see, but somehow, against all evidence, continue to trust was there. That trust, that stubborn, irrational, beautiful trust in something beyond what the eye can see and the mind can explain. That is not naivety. That is not weakness. That is the most sophisticated spiritual act a human being is capable of. To believe in the goodness of the plan when you cannot see the plan. To trust the architect when the building is in ruins. To say, I do not understand this, I did not choose this, I would not have written this chapter for myself. And then to say in the same breath, but I trust the one who is writing it. Every woman in this room, every woman hearing these words, carries a story that the world has not fully seen. A private weight. A silent grief. A loss that lives in the part of you that you do not show in public, that you protect carefully, that you have learned to carry so skillfully that most people who look at you have no idea how much you are holding. And I want to say to that hidden part of you, the part that is still hurting, still healing, still some days barely holding on, I see you. Not the performance, not the composed, capable, moving forward version. The real you, the one who is still in the middle of it, the one who is not yet a role. Arrived at the conclusion, but is walking faithfully and courageously toward it. I see you, and what I see is not someone who is broken. What I see is someone who is becoming. And becoming is the most sacred, most powerful, most unstoppable process in the universe. You did not lose everything. You lost everything that was preventing you from becoming everything. And there is a difference so enormous, so life-altering, so completely transformative in the understanding of that difference, that it will reorganize the entire way you read your own story. From tragedy to testimony, from loss to liberation, from the rubble of what was to the foundation of what is being built, something so much greater, so much truer, so much more magnificently aligned with who you actually are and what you are actually sent here to do. That one day, standing in the fullness of the life God always had planned for you, you will look back at the moment you lost everything, and you will say, that was not the day my life ended. That was the day my real life finally, beautifully, mercifully began.